Evans Inkum and Redwan Karim-Dini Osman are all standing by to bring us the latest updates on the happenings at the place. And Evans joins me now. Hello, Evans.
Hello, Sawa.
What is the mood at the AICC currently?
Well, Sawa, solemn. People also sharing their fond memories as far as the illustrious son of Africa, and for that matter, even the world, is concerned, Kofi Annan. But I have with me here, before I run you through the number of diplomats who have also paid their last respect to Kofi Annan, I just have with me here Mr. Emmanuel Bombardier, a man who knows it all when it comes to African politics and global politics. Mr. Bombardier, I thank you very much for your time. You have been here since morning.
Yes, I have. And thank you for also all your work, GH1. In my current role with the UN, where I am working outside, I follow you, and you help me to be abreast with everything that is happening back home, and I thank you for that.
We also thank you for following us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so now, share with us your fond memories. I mean, he's somebody that you've been following for a very long time.
Yes.
What can you tell us as far as Kofi Annan is concerned?
First of all, as we mourn with his family, as all of us as a people united grieve and bid farewell, we should keep in mind that he was a gift of Ghana to the rest of the world. And so from Infansipim to the University of Science and Technology, College of Science and Technology at the time, and into the United States and Europe, at the age of 24, he had experienced the cultures of his own Africa, Ghana, North America, and Europe. So he became a global citizen. And he contributed immensely, keeping in mind that he brought to the forefront the dignity of the human person. And he made human suffering to preoccupy him in all the diplomatic work he did. So that by the time he became Secretary General, he was preoccupied with how can the opportunities of the 21st century bring about equity, bring about a global community that is peaceful with itself. And the good thing is, he looked at it from the level of the state and upwards into the global community.
Now, Mr. Bombardier, you are staying with us. We are going to delve much into the life of Mr. Kofi Annan. But my colleague Redwan has a former minister and also a member of parliament for Nandole. So, Redwan, you are engaged. Wow, okay.
Rashid Pelpo, who is former Minister of State at the presidency under the Eswal Mahama administration. You're live on GH1 television.
Thank you very much.
First and foremost, a lot has been said about the legacy of the former UN Secretary General. But what would you say his contribution to global peace and security would be?
What he contributed was embodied in his very personality. He brought into the scene a humble person who has risen to the pinnacle of power, but allowed himself to use his demeanor to influence his diplomacy. And so he brought a new breath of life in how countries relate and in how individuals influence life in the relation between two countries. The new diplomatic relation he developed was to say that countries can be good to each other even when they are quarreling. Countries can be friends even when there is a problem. And that solutions can always be gotten if we develop friendship between individuals in the countries.
Now, this is a man who was passionate about youth empowerment, development on the continent, and of course, he talked about agriculture, using the sector to actually develop the continent. What do you reckon African leaders can learn from the life he lived?
I think that being an African and being who he was a big advantage. And so African leaders must begin to learn how not to grow above their positions and how to understand the feelings and the pulse of the people, and that countries can be better off if we have leaders who know and leaders who have an aim and an objective. With everything about Kofi Annan, he had his objective and he always worked with it. And he had his principles and he stood by them. And those principles were the ones that guided him in everything he did. And it was the reason he was a big success, because he stood on them and he presented his argument based on those. And he developed a wide range of social scope that allowed him to impact on his diplomacy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so you heard me speak to the Honorable Member of Parliament for West Central, also former Minister of State at the presidency under the John Mahama administration. And so we are still here at the Accra International Conference Center, and Evans Inkum is standing by with the former Executive Director for WANEP, Mr. Bombande.
All right, exactly. So I still have with me Emmanuel Habuka Bombade, and currently he's the Senior Mediation Advisor, standby team of Mediation Advisor, Department of Political Affairs. Mr. Bombade, I just want to quote something from Kofi Annan, and then we have a brief discussion on that. Now, this is what the former United Nations General Secretary said. SJ, that is Secretary General, is, well, but sometimes it becomes a scapegoat. According to Kofi Annan, the Secretary General tag sometimes become a scapegoat. What do you make of that?
You know, Busumuru, Kofi Annan used to repeat that the United Nations can be as effective as the member nations of the UN want it to be. But keep in mind that as Secretary General, his diplomatic skills was always to build consensus. But the final decision was always in the Security Council, which is the highest security architecture of the world. So that if the world was going to move in a certain direction, he tries to facilitate it, but he cannot force member states to do things if they are not committed politically to do it. And that is why they use him as a scapegoat. But they know very well that he is not the one who can make things happen.
Exactly.
And I think we must understand and appreciate that in the most difficult circumstances, he was constantly looking at the 21st century in terms of what are the opportunities for global peace, but how can there be equity? And that's why he started off with his report in Larger Freedom, where he says that in every country, when we have respect for human rights, when we have peace, and when we have development, we are bound to make progress. And it's interesting that today, as we mourn and we celebrate him, there are certain regions in the world in which we have made leaps backwards in what he stood for. But I always say that whilst he was a gift of Ghana to the rest of the world, he always wanted home to be an example. And my message, since I have this opportunity with you, is that Busumuru Kofi Annan, as we respect him lying in state, is not happy with our politics in which people are celebrating political vigilante groups, because that is a recipe for violence. And let's not wait and in 2020 we begin to ask ourselves, why is there so much violence when we have seen it in the past 2 years? Kofi Annan would want all our political leaders to bring back respect, decency and tolerance in political competition, so that at the end of the day, Ghana is always the beneficiary. Because Ghana is bigger than all of us. And that's, for me, what Sumuru Kofi Annan would want of all political leaders in Ghana as we celebrate his legacy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emmanuel Habuka Bombade. You have been of help to GH1. I thank you very much for your time. So, Redwan, I know you have another diplomat. Take it from here.
All right, thank you very much, William Evans Inkum. So I've been joined by the ambassador for the Islamic Republic of Iran, Dr. Maleki. You're live on GH1 television.
Condolences.
What would you say will be your fondest memories of the late Kofi Annan?
Dr. Kofi Annan not only was famous leader, man in Ghana, but also he was about peace and security and human rights in the world. Thank you.
What would you also say his contribution towards peace and security in your country would be?
Yes, I told not only in one country, but also it brought peace in the world. Every country in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and some countries like that.
Thank you very much. So you had me speak to the ambassador for the Islamic Republic of Iran, Dr. Maleki, telling us about his fondest memories of the late Kofi Annan, and of course his contribution towards peace and security in Iran. We are still here at the Accra International Conference Center, and of course this remains our comprehensive coverage on the three-day final funeral rites for the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. And of course William Evans Inkum is still here.
All right, so right now we've seen a number of diplomats coming here to pay the last respect to an illustrious son of Africa, Kofi Annan. Well, I've seen the lives of the Korean ambassador to Ghana, Mr. Samson Kim, was here. And in fact, what struck me was that comment from the Liberian ambassador to Ghana, Genevieve Kennedy. He said Kofi Annan did a lot for Liberia.
Right, and what you are seeing now is the delegation from the Infansipim School, the MOBA group, the year group for the late Kofi Annan. So such a long and winding queue. The delegation from the Infansipim Old Boys Association right here at the Accra International Conference Center to pay their last respect to the late Kofi Annan. This is indeed very significant because the late Kofi Annan contributed immensely towards the development of the association, and today they are here in their numbers to bid him farewell and also file past his mortal remains.
All right, so Redwan, what other dignitaries are we expecting? I don't know if you'll be told, because I know that the president is not coming today.
Yeah, but we expect the president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, to arrive in the country. We are also expecting the president of Namibia, Hage Geingob, to also arrive in the country. Then, of course, the current UN chief, Mr. Antonio Guterres, is also expected in the country, and he will not be here alone. A high-powered delegation from the United Nations would actually be part of his entourage as they make their way into the country today. So we are expecting world leaders, we are expecting heads of state across the continent, and of course they will be arriving in a bit.
Okay, so in your screens the judges from the various judicature as far as the country judicial system is concerned. Yeah, so they are also here to pay their last respect. So Sawa, it's been an eventful day. Lots of dignitaries are turning up to pay their last respect to Kofi Annan. Back to you, Sawa.
Evans, you were there yesterday. How smooth has the process been today compared to what we saw yesterday?
Say it again.
I want to find out from you, how smooth has the process been today compared to what we saw yesterday?
Well, it's a bit noisy here, but I don't know if you are asking about the atmosphere.
No, Evans,
Is that exactly
okay,
what you're asking?
Evans, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think it's a bit better now.
All right, so I want to find out from you. You were there yesterday. How smooth is the process today compared to that of yesterday? Do you see a lot more interest in people coming to file past the mortal remains as compared to yesterday, or the interest has waned? Unfortunately, I think Evans cannot hear me, but you can see on your screens, you saw on your screens earlier, dignitaries and members of the diplomatic corps going to the Accra International Conference Center to pay their last respect to the former UN Secretary General. We'll try and go back there later, but he was the 7th UN Secretary General, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and known worldwide as a man of peace. In this special documentary, we bring you a detailed biography of a man whose life and mission touched millions of lives worldwide. Here is Kofi Annan revealed.
The late 1930s were a period of global upheaval. In Europe, a resurgent Germany with Adolf Hitler at the helm and aided by fascist allies in Italy and Japan threatened the international order. Meanwhile, in Spain, a brutal civil war raged on between General Francisco Franco's nationalist forces and the Republicans. In the United States, the environmental catastrophe of the Dust Bowl led to waves of internal migration, especially to California. Economically, the effects of the Great Depression were still being felt around the globe. In Africa, Ethiopia had bravely resisted the Italian invasion of 1936, but most of the continent remained under colonial rule. In the Gold Coast, now Ghana, Kofi Annan and his twin sister Ifwata were born on April 8, 1938, in the historic town of Cape Coast to Victoria and Henry Reginald Annan, both of whom were of aristocratic stock. Henry Reginald, or H.R. Annan, was also a highly respected administrator and businessman, rising to become the first African director of the United Africa Company, UAC, one of the bulwarks of British enterprise in the Gold Coast.
My contemporary, and I knew him quite intimately because his stepmother was my aunt. And so we were in the same family, as it were. But there's something you have to say. It is this family background which he had. I always want to point out that it is his background, his pedigree, his progeny, which made him determined with the aspiration and ambition to sublime in a decent career.
The young Kofi and his sister grew up in Kumasi, the capital of the renowned Asante Empire, which became part of the Gold Coast and later Ghana. From 1954 to 1957, Kofi Annan was a student at Infantsman School, an elite Methodist boarding school known by its students and alumni as the school, and the oldest such institution in the country. It was during the days of pre-independence agitation and competing visions for the soon-to-be independent model colony. Infantsman was one of the places where the young Kofi began to chart the course of his life.
Our first acquaintance naturally was at school, because we happened to have spent 5 years together in the same boarding school, and that was our first contact.
He was in Freeman House, I was in Lockhart. We used to call him Domo. In 1955 and 1956, that was just before independence, and there was a lot of political agitation in Ghana. And Kofi coming from Kumasi and being aligned with the politics of Kumasi. And you know, democracy in Kumasi was described as Domo. Therefore, eventually, Kofi, being aligned with that line of argument, was given a nickname, and the nickname was Annan Domo.
He was like every schoolboy. He enjoyed his time at the school. He was my schoolmate, and he was a very affable, amiable, and active pupil in the school, in the sense that he was noticed.
We went to Form 2 directly, but Kofi went to Form 1, and therefore strictly he would not have been our mate. But Kofi did so well in Form 1 that in 1955, Kofi jumped from Form 1 to Form 3. So that is how Kofi became our mate. So you could see, even at that time, he was very intelligent.
I left. I didn't finish at Infantspeem. I left Infantspeem in 1955 to go to the United Kingdom to continue my secondary schooling.
Over the years, we had plenty of time to ruminate and also to remember our days together at Infantspeem.
Not every pupil at a school gets noticed. You must have a certain personality. You must have a certain affability. You must have a certain gift with the authorities, that is the headmaster and staff, noticing you. This was the system in those days. And Kofi and I belonged to that system.
Certainly there were no wise men coming in from the east to point out to us that this was a special child, and he was just one of us. We were all boys together. There was nothing particularly indicative that any of us was going to become what on. Now therefore there was no sign. Nobody could have said at that time that he or any other child was destined to become what Kofi became.
Welcome back, and that was a detailed documentary of who the man Kofi Annan really was. Let's take you back to the Accra International Conference Center. My colleague Ridwan Karimdini Osman is standing by to bring us more updates. Hello, Ridwan.
Hello, Sawa, I'm here.
Right, it's good to see you. Ridwan, compared to yesterday, do you see a lot more people coming in to file past the mortal remains of the late Kofi Annan?
So we are not seeing a lot of people like yesterday, because today it is for the dignitaries, it's for the high-powered delegation. So when they come in, once they are done filing past the remains of the former UN Secretary General, they just leave the premises. And so I can tell you for a fact that the orderliness here is something that is right on point. And so we are not seeing a lot of people crowd the place like we saw yesterday. But right now we have the delegation from Akwemufie, and those are the people you are seeing right there on your shots. They are clad in black and red, and of course performing some tradition here and there, all to signify that indeed they are in a state of mourning. Earlier we saw the delegation from the Infantspeem Old Boys Association, and so right now we expect that the other top government officials would also arrive. We are expecting the delegation from Parliament, which hasn't arrived yet. We understand that in a few minutes they will actually arrive here to also go through the process. But right now I have been joined by a gentleman from Poland. He's going to tell us about himself and also share a few memories with us. You're live on GH1 TV, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Michał Cygan. I represent Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs today. I'm part of the delegation headed by Undersecretary of State Piotr Wawrzyk, who will be present here tomorrow to offer his condolences, to express his regrets on the passing of Mr. Kofi Annan, one of the greatest political leaders of not only Africa but of our times. So this is also a very touching historical moment.
Right. Could you briefly trace your relationship, your country's relationship with the former UN Secretary General?
That's actually also touching a personal side in my case, because I was at the time student when Kofi Annan came to Poland in the year 2000 to co-found a community of democracies, the group of countries, more than 100 countries that are democracies like Poland, like Ghana, and I was a voluntary at that time, and seeing Mr. Annan in Warsaw during that summit was one of the impulses that made me join the foreign ministry. So it's a very personal trait as well, not only a professional for me as a deputy director for Africa, but also something that goes back a long way to the past.
Okay, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at the Mass Requiem tomorrow.
Yes, of course.
All right, so you're still live on GH1 television. I must say that we have seen top delegations from the chieftaincy institution that we have in the country, and they keep coming in. We've also seen those coming from the security services. We've seen that of prisons. We've seen that of the Ghana National Fire Service. We've seen that of the custom. We've seen also those from the police service. We expect the dignitaries to arrive shortly, especially the heads of states and of course the delegation from the United States. So right now we are taking you to the foyer here at the Accra International Conference Center, just for you to have a sense of what is happening here. And so those are live pictures from the foyer of the Accra International Conference Center, and you have the Infansipim Old Boys Association, who are currently performing, even as they pay their last respect to the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. And so what you're witnessing are old boys from Infansipim who are actually performing some choral music in honor of the late UN Chief, Mr. Kofi Annan. And so we'll continue with our comprehensive coverage on the 3-day funeral rites of the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. And so they just finished with the choral performance, or the choral music performance. And so right now, I think they would pay their last respects and of course make their way out of the foyer. But I must indicate that this ceremony has drawn people from across the length and breadth of the globe. At least we have seen a lot of high commissioners. We've seen a lot of ambassadors who today, despite their busy schedules, have been able to come here to file past the remains of the global icon, Mr. Kofi Annan. And so what we are witnessing right now is some prayer being said for the late Kofi Annan, led by the leader of the delegation from the Infansipim Old Boys Association. And so I'm sure we want to listen in a little, and I will come back and continue to talk about what is happening right here at the foyer of the Accra International Conference Center. All right, so the prayer has just finished, and so we are making our way back to the entrance of the Accra International Conference Center. So there you have the delegation from the Infansipim Old Boys Association making their way out of the foyer of the Accra International Conference Center. Indeed, a very long queue, you can tell, snaking, their way out of the foyer, and I'm sure we'll be engaging some of them in a tad. We have seen the likes of Mr. Gusi Tano, who we all know is seeking to lead the NDC in the 2020 election. We've also seen other former top government officials who are part of the delegation from the Infansipim Old Boys Association. And so what I'm going to do right now is just, try to pick among the delegation and see exactly see who will be engaging us right here on GH1 television. But of course, this remains our continuing comprehensive coverage on the final funeral rites for the former UN chief Kofi Annan, who is a son of the soil. That of course explains why Ghana indeed is playing host to his send-off, and so we'll be engaging some of them in a bit. So I have seen Mr. Addison. Hello, sir. You are live on GH1 television.
Hello, nice to see you.
All right. I'm sure he doesn't want to talk, but I will try and get a lot more people who would be speaking to us right here on this particular network. But let me indicate that this remains your trusted news source when things are happening, when events are happening, such important events. We make sure that you don't miss every single scene, and so I'll be bringing you all the details right here on this very particular program. And so there you have the Infansipim Old Boys Association, I think they're called the MOBA, making their way out of the foyer here at the Accra International Conference Center. But like I indicated already, we've seen top echelons of the clergy, we've seen the leadership of the Muslim community make their way here. We've also seen royal delegations from the various chieftaincy institutions that we have in this country, all coming here to pay their last respect to the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. In a bit, we'll be interacting with Mr. Gusitano, who is part of the MOBA delegation here at the Accra International Conference Center. But I must say that despite the drumming and of course the accompaniment, the musical accompaniment, the atmosphere here is still somber, which is indicative that in as much as culture is being brought alive, we are still mourning, we are still remembering the legacy of the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. And so in your shots right now are members of the delegation from the Infansipim Old Boys Association, who today have made their way to the foyer here at the Accra International Conference Center to pay their last respects to Mr. Kofi Annan. Let me speak to Mr. McBain Asamoah, who is part of the delegation. You're live on GH1 television.
Hi.
All right. We've seen that quite a long queue, I must say, of the delegation from the Infansipim Old Boys Association. Beyond filing past the remains of the former UN Secretary General, what are the other reflections?
Well, for us, I came here as part of the Infansipim Old Boys Association, and for us, it's an issue of having a good reflection on the life of Mr. Kofi Annan, being an old boy, what he put his life down for the country and to the world as a whole. We see him as an excellent or par-excellent diplomat who served the nations, and his advocacy for peace and international unity. It's around this time, looking at what is happening around the world and all that, his death to us is a way, or to us it means that we should take steps to ensure there's peace in the world. We should take steps to ensure that we do the right things, because most of the happenings around now is an issue of the decisions we take, especially in leadership and all that. We should take the necessary reflection in terms of the decisions we make, in terms of our governance, in terms of our international relations, and also ensure that humanity in general, we take decisions that will inure to the well-being of humanity. The less privileged in the world, the less privileged in our society, in our community, we should take decisions that will look at their best interests.
A lot has been said about who the man Kofi Annan was, and some have described him as the illustrious son of Africa, the global icon. What sort of a man was he to the MOBA group?
For me, I mean, I've known Kofi Annan to be a diplomat. He's worked, my knowledge of him spanned from when he was Under Secretary General at the UN responsible for peacekeeping, and also when he became the substantive Secretary General. I've known him to be working for the nations as far as unity, peace, and others are concerned. So that's the little I know about him.
Thank you very much, Mr. Magbena Samoa. So Mr. Magbena Samoa is a communication consultant. He is part of the mobile delegation here at the Accra International Conference Center. And so we try and engage a lot more people and find out exactly how the day is going to look like. Already we have indicated that in a few minutes the delegation from Parliament, of course made up of the minority and the majority members in Parliament, will be making their way here. Of course they will be filing past the mortal remains of the former UN Secretary General Mr. Kofi Annan. But we're going to make our way there and speak to a lot more people. And so right now it looks like the royal delegation keeps coming in. So we have one already making their way to the foyer. Such a long royal delegation. I understand they are from Akwemufie in the eastern region, clad in their black and red, some having leaves and all of that. That is all part of the tradition of the Akwemufie stool. And so they are here in their numbers to actually pay their last respect to the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. They are not just here, they also have with them some wreaths that they will be laying in honoring the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. But I've been joined by Mr. Gusi Tano, who is seeking to become the flag bearer for the National Democratic Congress. You're live on GH1 television, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're part of the mobile group. This is the question I asked Magben earlier. What sort of a man was Mr. Kofi Annan to the Fancy Old Boys Association?
I think he exemplified the traditions and values of the school by the work that he did internationally in projecting Ghana, projecting Africa, and being part of resolving some of the major problems that face the international community. So we're proud of him and we're sad by his passing, and we hope that some of us can also emulate the example that he set.
What would you say his major contribution to global leadership will be?
I think during the UN reform process, he was an important moderating force. That's during the administrative reforms of the UN. He was very much instrumental in the sustainable development goals that all of us now live by and try and achieve. So these are one or two of just very important track record of achievement and service to Ghana and to the international community.
And what do you think politicians, current politicians, can learn from the life he lived?
Well, I think that he was a consensus builder. And I think our politicians can learn a little bit about consensus building rather than a winner-take-all approach.
Thank you very much.
So much. A real pleasure.
Tano is an aspiring flag bearer for the largest opposition National Democratic Congress. So this remains our continuing comprehensive coverage of the final funeral rites for the former UN chief, Mr. Kofi Annan, who has been described by a lot of people as a man of peace, an illustrious son of Africa, of course, a global icon. But I'll be engaging my colleague Wilberforce Asari very soon. We need to know what exactly is happening with the foreign delegation. We are expecting some heads of states. I'm hearing reports from the presidency, and so he will be telling us exactly when these personalities will be arriving in the country. But on top, we know that the current UN chief, Mr. Antonio Guterres, will be arriving in the country with a high-powered delegation from the United Nations. And so all those personalities we are expecting in the country. But of course, be reminded that tomorrow we'll be climaxing the final funeral rites for the late Kofi Annan. And of course, we'll be here to bring you all the major happenings. We understand the president will not be here today, but of course, he will be here tomorrow together with other top government officials. And so, Wilberforce, the heads of states, when are they arriving?
Well, let me use my microphone. Okay, so what we do know is that they have started trickling in at the airport. We do not know whether those who are trickling in are heads of states, but we know that some people have started arriving at the airport. But over here at the grounds, currently what is going on inside is that the representatives from the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Center are here to pay their last respects, and they are also reading their tributes in honor of Kofi Annan. Earlier on, his former school in Fansipim, right? They came to do all their singing and all their recitations to honor the life of Kofi Annan. So for now, from behind us, you can see that there's a host of chiefs who have come from far and near, yes, to come and also pay their last respects. So I can tell you that the turnout today is far higher than those who turned up yesterday. So yesterday, those who had complaints that because the body wasn't open, people were not interested. Today is a different story. Several more people are turning out here to pay their last respect to Mr. Kofi Annan.
Now let's talk about the caliber of people who have come here today. I mean, we've seen almost all the ambassadors come into here at the Accra International Conference Center, and they have said a lot of things. I mean, they've said wonderful stuff about Mr. Kofi Annan. And what would you say has been the common denominator for you?
Well, I think that the common denominator is the fact that Mr. Kofi Annan worked for world peace. And so almost everybody that we have engaged today has something to say about peace. And so this is a man for all intents and purposes was associated with the word peace. And so it is interesting to see that a lot of people, particularly from the diplomatic corps in the country, and because of my association with the foreign ministry, I've seen a lot of them from all the various countries that have representation in Ghana. They have all come here to pay their last respect, and almost all the people that we engage have something to say about his contribution to world peace and security. And so I think that this is a man who will be remembered forever and ever as far as world peace and security is concerned.
All right. Just for the sake of our viewers who are perhaps joining in the coverage, this remains our comprehensive coverage of the final funeral rites for Mr. Kofi Annan. Exactly what would we be doing tomorrow? What is the item on the agenda tomorrow?
So tomorrow is tight, right from 8 a.m. in the morning, because that is the official state funeral for Mr. Kofi Annan. What it means is that the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Akufo-Addo, the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, together with the Speaker of Parliament, the Chief Justice, will be leading the entire Ghanaian populace to pay their last respect to Mr. Kofi Annan. Indeed, we know that several world leaders and world leaders representatives are going to be present. So the police already have announced that they are going to be closing this road, the road right in front of the conference center and some other roads. And that is because they want to maintain maximum security. So tomorrow, the funeral service, of course, will be held. All the necessary respect will be accorded Mr. Kofi Annan. We are told that there's going to be a 21-man gun salute in honor of him, and then there's going to be full military honors for him. I don't know whether the aircrafts are going to fly over this space or not, but what we do know is that it's going to be full state burial for Mr. Kofi Annan tomorrow.
All right, thank you very much.
Welcome back to the studios. My name is Sewa Ami, and we're bringing you a comprehensive coverage of the 3-day state funeral for the late Kofi Annan. Let's bring you a part 2 of the biography of the late Kofi Annan.
Mr. Annan's career at the United Nations began in 1962 when he was appointed an administrative and budget officer with the World Health Organization in Geneva. Later on, he would work with the UN's Economic Commission for Africa, ECA, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
He was one of those few who went through the system, the routine system of the world of the United Nations family of organizations. And he was under the guidance of Mr. Robert Kwekwata Gardner.
my brother, my sister, and myself were with my parents in Addis Ababa, the Economic Commission for Africa. My father had just become the deputy head of the Economic Commission for Africa. And Kofi came there on a posting. In fact, both he and his first wife were posted to Addis. Kofi with the ECA, and his wife Titi with OAU, I believe. So they came as a young couple. And we were, well, I was a teenager, and my two siblings are younger, but they were also following closely on my heels. And that was the days when, a rock and roll had come into being, and everybody was dancing, jitterbugging and stuff like that. And this young couple, Kofi and his they knew all the steps.
In 1972, Kofi Annan earned a Master of Science degree from the Sloan School of Management at the world-famous Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. He then took up a posting at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Ghana is a land rich in natural attractions and celebrated for the warmth of its people. From 1974 to 1976, Mr. Annan helped set up the Ghana Tourist Board to help promote this beautiful country.
Well, I met him for the first time in Ghana in the mid-1970s, proper 75 or thereabouts. He was then head of the Tourist Board. And in those days, there was a committee known as the Public Agreements Review Committee, which was mandated to review all agreements entered into by any governmental agency before final approval by either the cabinet or the equivalent of a cabinet. So Mr. Kofi Annan, at that time being head of an organization, had entered into an agreement or negotiated an agreement with a foreign entity. And so he appeared before our committee, of which I was chairman, for the purposes of defending the agreement, as it were. We review it and give him comments. That was the first time I met him.
After his return to the UN, his ascent into the organization's higher echelons continued as he worked as Assistant Secretary General in 3 successive posts: the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Geneva, and at UN headquarters as Assistant Secretary General for Human Resources Management and Security Coordinator for the UN system from 1987 to 1990, Assistant Secretary General for Program Planning, Budget and Finance, and Controller from 1990 to 92. He was Under Secretary General in charge of peacekeeping operations from 1993 to 1996. It was during this period that 2 tragic and epical incidents occurred, which ultimately led to a more robust approach to the UN's involvement in the resolution of conflicts, namely the Rwandan genocide of 1994 and the Srebrenica massacre of 1995.
He could inspire. He was very organized, very efficient, and very sharp. So in a second, he would quickly, grasp the essence of what you had to communicate to him. He was extremely quick to assimilate all the material that was put before him. And he was a consensus builder. He always sought to get everybody at the table, get everybody's view, and he always sought to build a consensus, especially among the member states. Because, you have to remember that being Secretary General of the UN means that you are responsible to all the 190-something member states. In a sense, they are your masters. So a Secretary General of the UN first has to win the confidence of the entire membership, the member states. He has to be able to work with all of them, understand their views, their concerns.
Peacekeeping, it's one of the methods used by the United Nations in bringing a country or a situation that has been in distress to normalcy. For example, I say one of the means, because peacekeeping alone does not restore peace to a distressed country. It's just one of the means. And this started from the Middle East following the creation of the State of Israel.
Kofi Annan was a true UN person inside out. He had worked there for long. He had been in practically all the departments, starting, of course, from finance and administration, moving on to political affairs, and then ending up as Under-Secretary General for Peacekeeping, and in very challenging missions. So that gave him a very broad and at the same time deep perspective of UN peacekeeping as a whole. Additionally, when he became Secretary General, he then decided to embark on an analysis of what had gone wrong with some of the peacekeeping missions and how to improve global peacekeeping.
On 1st January 1997, Kofi Annan replaced Boutros Boutros-Ghali as Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, in the process becoming the first sub-Saharan African to attain that position. He was also the first head of the UN to have risen through the ranks of the organization.
We'll bring you a part 3 of the biography of the late Kofi Annan. But since his demise, many tributes have been pouring in for the global icon. Here's one from the current UN Chief, Antonio Guterres.
We are here to pay tribute to Kofi Annan, one of the best of us, a man who embodied United Nations values and made us all proud to call ourselves his colleagues. This is a personal loss for many of us. It is difficult to imagine what a blow it must be to his wife and to his family. Our hearts go out to them. We know how much Kofi meant to the world. I would like to say a few words about what he meant to all of us who work for the United Nations. Kofi Annan's years in office were an exciting time. He put forward new ideas. He brought new people into the United Nations family. He spoke passionately about our mission and our role. He created a renewed sense of possibility, both inside and outside our organization, about what the UN could do and could be for the world's people. Because of his long and varied career in different offices and departments, it sometimes seemed as though Kofi knew everyone personally. But even staff members who never met him felt a bond with Kofi, because he was really one of us. As I said on Saturday, in many ways, Kofi Annan was the United Nations. His most defining features were his humanity and solidarity with those in need. He put people at the center of the work of the United Nations and was able to turn compassion into action across the UN system. We are still reaping the rewards of the Millennium Summit, when he brought the world together to agree the first global targets on poverty and child mortality. His response to the HIV/AIDS epidemic, united governments, non-governmental organizations, and the healthcare industry, and undoubtedly saved many lives. And Kofi Annan faced up to the grave errors made by the United Nations in the 90s. In its response to the Rwanda genocide and Srebrenica killings, by shining a light inside the UN. The reports he commissioned aimed to make sure such terrible mistakes are never repeated and set the international community on a new course in its response to mass atrocities. A true voice for the voiceless. He did not shy away from the most challenging issues, but worked creatively to bridge differences and protect the most vulnerable. He stood his ground without antagonizing others. His humility, good humor, courtesy and charm went hand in hand with enormous wisdom and strength. He will always remain vivid in my memory for as long as I live, but not essentially because of the fact he was an extraordinary statesman, a remarkable diplomat, an inspiring leader, but above all, because of his gentleness, of his warmth, of his friendship. He was indeed a good man and a gentleman, and always at our disposal to support us, to comfort us, to be in full solidarity with us in any difficult moment that one of us as colleagues of him would have. Perhaps we can best honor his legacy by recalling his own words delivered at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony, and I quote, "Securing real and lasting improvement in the lives of individual men and women is the measure of all we do at the United Nations. In these times of growing political divides and intractable conflicts, we need the peacemaking spirit of Kofi Annan more than ever."
And that was tribute from the current UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Let's take you back to the Accra International Conference Center, where the body of the late Kofi Annan has been laid in state for public viewing. But today is for dignitaries and government officials, members of the diplomatic corps, ministers of state, members of parliament, chiefs, and so on. My colleague Redwan Karimdini Osman is standing by to bring us more updates. Hello, Redwan.
Hello, Sawame here.
Right, before you continue, run us through quickly which dignitaries have come so far to pay their last respect to Kofi Annan.
Well, Sawame here, none of the heads of states that we are expecting in the country has arrived yet. But of course, we've seen representatives of various countries come here to file past the mortal remains of the former UN Secretary General. I mean, we've seen representatives from Iran, we've seen representatives from Cuba, we've seen representatives from Poland, across the globe. They keep coming in, especially for those that have their embassies here. A lot of them have already come in. But like I've said a number of times, we are expecting the president of Zimbabwe, Messing Mnangagwa, the Ivorian president, Alassane Ouattara, and of course a host of other leaders here in the country. We've already gotten indication that they would arrive in the country today. The man you heard from a while ago, the UN chief, Mr. Antonio Guterres, would also arrive in the country today. But we have a delegation from South Africa who will be engaging them in a bit. We are picking information that the person we are about to speak to is very close to the former South African president, Nelson Mandela. And so that conversation will be coming up in a bit. But here at the Accra International Conference Center, the atmosphere is still somber. We have the police personnel already in action. We've seen the police, we've seen the prisons, we've seen the army, all here just to ensure that in as much as we want to mourn, in as much as we want to do all the drumming as part of activities to mourn the former UN Secretary General, we do that in the spirit of sanity and of course with the highest sense of responsibility. So let me engage the delegation from South Africa in a bit. Madam, you're live on GH1 television.
No. Let's finish this.
All right. Okay. So it looks like the exchanging some pleasantries then. So she will be speaking to me in a bit. So like I have already indicated, it looks like this program, of course, it was expected, well thought out. We've seen a number of ambulances. We've seen security vehicles, and in fact, we have tents that have also been mounted so that when there are any eventualities, of course, those from the ambulance service, the paramedics will be able to respond appropriately.
And so this is Ghanaian television?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. Please, madam, just tell us a few things about yourself and also what you remember about the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan.
I have been working with Kofi Annan for many years as a Secretary General of the UN and also as a peacemaker. You will remember that he led a delegation of which I was a member to help Kenya to navigate through the tragedies of the 2007-2008 elections. And Kofi helped really to establish the foundations of a constitution which Kenya came to adopt, and it has been leading that country ever since. But in recent years, Kofi was the chair of the Elders, an organization established by Nelson Mandela. And we have been working very closely on issues of peace in the world, equality. We have been working on social justice together. But he will be remembered, in my view, he will be remembered as the Secretary General of the UN. I think there will be very few who will remember other Secretary Generals, and I'm not being diplomatic here. But he is really the one all people in the world, when they say this Secretary General of the UN, it's the face of Kofi Annan. And I take pride. He is a son of the soil in Africa, and it is an African who led the globe to navigate these complex times of ours, in which peace is sought, where equality is sought, and we will miss him. We will miss him very, very dearly. It is going to be very difficult to find someone who can step in his shoes. I would say that the globe was offered. It was Nelson Mandela. It is Kofi Annan, and these are our sons, and we take pride in the legacy.
Right. Here in Ghana, we love him, we revere him, but what sort of a man was he to South Africans?
Kofi was as Ghanaian as South African, or as Mozambican, or as Zambian as you wish. Wherever he would be, he was essentially an African. And not only he gave leadership, but also he touched the hearts and the minds, particularly of young people, inspiring them, making sure that they know that a better world is possible, and it is in their hands to make it happen. So I think he is felt as one of our own in any African country where you are. And Ghana, you are proud, but you share him with all of us. Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. So also you heard me speak to a member of the Mandela family, telling us a lot about the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan, and of course, as we speak, still interacting with the media. But of course, we have other interesting things that are happening at the entrance of the Accra International Conference Center. Of course, apart from the drum accompaniment as part of the grieving moment, we are seeing artists upon artists come in just to present portrait upon portrait of the late former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. And as we speak, we have one gentleman who has put together this artifact for the late UN Secretary General, and I must say that it's looking quite beautiful. What's your name?
John Terrier.
All right. Okay. What inspired this work?
Mr. Kofi Annan has been my mentor since my young age. I had a Ghanaian who has been to the United Nations to be the United Secretary, and I was very proud to have my blood being at that position. So one day I took it myself. I'll do a portrait of him and post it on social media. And doing this work opened a lot of opportunities for me because I think the grace that he has just fell upon me as well. And through this portrait, I got a chance to meet the presidency of Bahrain. They contract me to do the portrait of the Royal Highness of Bahrain, and I got a chance to go and meet the ministries and the vice president of Bahrain. And I intend to keep this work because it means a lot to me, so that anytime I meet him, I can present it to him, because this work is priceless. It's not for sale. Something special, dear for my heart. But
so you look forward to presenting it to the family?
But unfortunate. But I would like to keep this work, and in future, if I get a museum or gallery, then let people know that through this artwork and the great man Kofi Annan, I managed to go far.
I know Mr. Kofi Annan wasn't an artist, but did he inspire you in any way?
Yeah. Because it's always my dream to help the needy, the poor, and people don't have. So I took it myself that I'll use my art to raise funds to support the needy. But seeing him helping the poor and the charity homes, and so I took it myself. I'll be like Mr. Kofi Annan all over the world. I'll do my best to support those who need. And he's my mentor. Mr. Kofi Annan is my mentor. Honestly, he's my mentor. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and we wish you all the best in your endeavors.
Thank you.
So you heard from the gentleman who has put together this beautiful work of art, and he says he looks forward to presenting it to a museum, hopefully to the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum, and of course just to keep the memory of Mr. Kofi Annan alive. But let me bring Wilberforce into the conversation. I mean, you found him.
Yes.
What exactly attracted you?
When I spoke with him, the story inspired me, and that is that he decided to draw Mr. Kofi Annan as an artist, put it on social media, and just by virtue of the precision of the drawing, it opened doors for him as an individual. And so it tells you the fact that you can draw the image of somebody, and by virtue of drawing that person's image, attract international attention. And that is one of the things that impressed me. I don't know if anybody has drawn you yet.
No.
Okay, so very, very interesting, and I am wishing you well. I'm hoping that you will pick it up upon yourself to find other portraits of him and draw them. And I'm sure that after appearing on GH1, somebody has heard you, somebody has seen you, and somebody will be contacting you very soon. We are going to take your number. Anybody who wants to contact you, we will link them to you, so that this thing can grow and become better than it is right now.
Later we'll present him with an invoice. But Charlie, thank you very much, and all the best once again.
Thank you.
So we are still here at the Accra International Conference Center. It's still day 2 of the final funeral rites for the late Kofi Annan, a son of the soil, a proud son of Ghana, the proud son of Africa, and of course a global icon. Today we've seen representatives across the globe, especially those that have their embassies and of course their missions here, coming to pay their last respect to the man that we all love and revere. And also we are expecting a lot more people to come here, but I'm here and I'm still wondering which ambassador or which high commissioner haven't we seen this morning. We've seen quite a number of them. I think the one that I haven't seen so far is perhaps the representative from Rwanda, but guess what, maybe they'll pull out a surprise and we'll be engaging them in a bit. So we have another artist, so it looks like a lot of them are presenting portraits for Mr. Kofi Annan. So this one too, looking very beautiful there, having the man with some touch of white and blue, you know, clad in his suit, of course, with a tie fitting to perfection. What's your name?
My name is Edu Solomon.
Your name is?
Edu Solomon.
Okay. What motivated you to put this together?
In the honor of our father Kofi Annan, how his passion, the attitude he puts to our young, that's why I motivate to do this artwork for him. And this art is a pointillism, using a point to do an artwork.
And so who are you hoping to present this to?
Actually, I just want to introduce to my friend. But actually forget the name small.
But thank you very much, and we wish you all the best as well. I told you we have artists upon artists trooping into more or less exhibits, the crafts that they have put together with, of course, the man Kofi Annan in mind. But we'll be engaging a lot more people right here on GH1 TV. But don't forget, this is your trusted news source, and of course this remains our comprehensive coverage of the final funeral rites for the late Kofi Annan. Hello sir, you're live on GH1 television.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Thomas Mensah. Today is a sad day for Africa and the world because we lost one of the most important people, actually a genius in diplomacy, Kofi Annan. As we pay our last respect and say farewell, we acknowledge his contributions to Africa and Ghana, to rise through the ranks of the United Nations to the peak, to become Secretary General of the entire United Nations. And you look at what he did there, you'll be shocked. He reformed the United Nations. He modernized it. He set up peacekeeping forces. And so we are mourning today and paying respect to one of the greatest sons of Africa and Ghana.
Would you say that his leadership on the globe had a trickle-down effect here in Ghana?
Oh, exactly. Because not only that, every place I go, as a scientist and inventor, I'm well known. The first thing people talk about, Kofi Annan. Wow. So it makes me feel proud because in diplomacy, what he did all over the world, solving intractable problems. Problems are very, very difficult. Even people volunteer him to even intervene in Syria, Iraq, everywhere, on tireless. He was doing this. And you look at him, the kind of strength he brings, quiet strength, quiet power. He gets things done. Now remember, his assistant, Patrick Hayford, he did a conference call with me and him. And I was so excited. This is a guy running United Nations, and he had a time to do a conference call with me to show you how humble he is, even no matter how high he is. I wrote to him after he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He wrote back to me and said, Dr. Thomas Spencer, thank you. I received this on behalf of the United Nations. That's even in my book. But the bottom line that he has the vision to set up the Kofi Annan ICT Center. He set it up in 2002. That's a vision. Because today UAE is training 1 million kids and youth in software development. 1 million.
So how do we ensure that we keep that vision alive? It doesn't die with him.
Yeah, and that's really one of the most important things I'm looking forward to. We've joined forces with the Kofi Annan Center, where our goal is maybe to train 300,000 youth in Ghana. Because you train 300,000 kids in software development, they will be in artificial intelligence, they will be in all the technologies. Wow. Until today is his day. Wow. He has done so much for Ghana, quietly. People even don't realize it. We're talking about agriculture and food. He was the first to be pushing food security, giving seeds to farmers. He was the first to do this. I was with the agri minister when we went to China on the presidential delegation. He's moving to, planting for foods. So we are going through him. We are looking for to bring in technology in agriculture from China to here. China has the ability to turn desert into forest. So in our northern areas, we can all bring that technology here because of his vision in agriculture, his vision in software development, his vision in diplomacy.
I'm sure if you want to talk about his exploits, we'll spend the whole day enumerating them. Yes. But thank you very much, Doc, for spending your time with us on GH1 television. And so, the tributes keep pouring in. A lot of dignitaries from different walks of life coming in to share a word or two about the man Kofi Annan. But let me just run you through briefly the sort of arrangement that has been made here at the Accra International Conference Center. And so you look on my left-hand side and you see that a tent, for instance, has been mounted to take care of emergency situations. And of course, you see a number of ambulances that have been packed just to ensure that when there are emergency cases, they will be able to attend to them swiftly. We've also seen, of course, the flags of the UN and that of Ghana being put up there, just indicative that what we are doing right now is for Ghana and, of course, the UN. Those are the two institutions that are the forefront of all of this. Of course, the Information Ministry of Ghana and, of course, that of the UN. So that is the current situation here at the Accra International Conference Center. I'm seeing the former flag bearer for the GCPP, I guess, yes, Mr. Latte coming in, and so in a touch we will be engaging him just to know his tributes for the late Kofi Annan. And there you have Mr. Latte also clad in his black attire with his shades on. Mr. Latte, you're welcome. You're live on GH1 television.
Thank you very much.
All right. You've gone to the foyer already. What was going through your mind as you filed past?
Millions of things, and I can't actually place it in my mind now. It was just sad that a great man like that has left us behind. But he left behind a lot of good history, a good legacy of peace, the development goals, taking care of the poor and making sure that the whole world can get rid of poverty. He left a good legacy. He did so well that I remember growing up in the UK, anywhere I went, and I said I'm from Ghana, I said, oh, they'll mention Kofi Annan. Or like when, he's not a footballer, but he's that well respected. And it's sad that he's gone. He's done his bit, he's paid his dues, and may his soul rest in peace.
What would you say are the core values that politicians here in Ghana can pick from his life to bring some sort of sanity in the politics that we are practicing in this country?
He's got a lot of humility. Because I remember at one time the big powers were not happy with him because of trying to bring an equal playing field. He held his own. He didn't insult. He listened, and he did what he had to do. He never insulted anyone. If there's a problem, he listens. I remember he even went to Syria, if you remember. He did what he had to. He gave out his report, and they didn't follow through and look at what has happened to Syria. So the thing we have to do as politicians is to follow his footsteps. Listen, absorb, come up with the ideas, and the rest will be history.
Thank you very much. But how is the GCPP doing?
It's really fine. You see, I'm here. That's my general secretary, so we're doing very well.
Making a comeback, right?
We're always there. We're over 22 years old now. No, it takes a long time.
Congratulations on that. Thank you very much. Mr. Latte is a former flag bearer for GCPP, and of course he has been sharing a lot on the life of Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, I must say, talking about his humility, his love for country, and of course the fact that he played a crucial role on the globe. And so we continue to pitch camp here to bring you every single happening here at the Accra International Conference Center. But at this juncture, I would like to bring into the conversation William Evans Inkum and of course Wilberforce Asare, who will be telling us a lot more. I'm sure they have been snooping around and making all sort of observations. So William and Wilberforce join me, right? Yeah. two of you. I'm sure you've been moving around and looking at what's happening. What observations have you made apart from what we've already shared with our viewers?
Well, I think a lot of people were looking at numbers, but I would say that organization has been a top-notch. The fact that everybody that comes here knows what he or she has to do. For the diplomat, I think the communication was made very clear to them. That is, when you enter the foyer, you file past, you get out, your car is already waiting to take you out. That situation where, well, I was expecting to see some level of a choked environment. That didn't happen. Nonetheless, I would say that the state protocol or whoever was in charge to ensure that the sanity actually prevails as far as this particular place is concerned has done a yeoman's job.
Right. Over first.
Well, so I think that I associate with the comments of William, and that is that organization has been upped, and it appears like people really sat down to plan how this whole thing is going to go. Well thought out plan. And what I'm looking forward to actually is tomorrow's funeral, because tomorrow we'll have a lot more people. You know, the president hasn't been here, the vice president hasn't been here. We are told that they will come tomorrow and be part of the last part of this whole activity. And so I expect that security might be a bit more beefed up, more than it is right now. And then also a lot more of the foreign dignitaries that we haven't seen yet will show up tomorrow. I think that two things have caught my attention, and that is the old students of Fansipim coming to sing and to honor their colleague, if I should say, even though he's much older than most of the people who came. Now, I think that their exhibition here was splendid. They sang their school's anthem, they sang various songs to honor Mr. Kofi Annan, and you realize that they had really come together to come and do this, and it was very well planned. The next thing was the monument that is named after Kofi Annan here in our country, and that is the Peacekeeping Center. Now, officials from the Peacekeeping Center were here, and they also actually read a prepared statement to honor the life of Mr. Kofi Annan. Perhaps, maybe one thing that I must add is the fact that President Akufo-Addo's cabinet ministers all came together at the same time, and they all filed past the remains of Mr. Kofi Annan and also exchanged greetings with Mr. Kofi Annan's family, who have been sitting here all day right in front of the casket. And so I think that these three things that have happened today, apart from the diplomatic corps who have come, have all gone a long way to honor the memory of the late Kofi Annan.
Right, so you had observations from Wilberforce and of course William Evans Inkum. They actually were here at the crack of dawn. I had to join them later for this coverage, but I will continue to pitch camp here. We would bring you every single happening like I had already indicated, and of course you know that even when the mortal remains was being brought into the country, we were at the airport to bring you all of that. And so when I say I would also bring you how all the dignitaries will be arriving in the country, I mean exactly what I'm talking about. But albeit in the meantime, right here at the Accra International Conference Center, as and when there are any eventualities, we'll come back to you and of course run them by you. My name is Ridwan Karim Dini Osman. Over to you, Sewame here.
Thank you very much, Ridwan Karim Dini Osman, and of course Wilberforce Osari and William Evans Inkum, our reporters on the ground at the Accra International Conference Center. This continues to be our special coverage of the final funeral rites of the late former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, and tributes have been pouring in since the demise of the global icon. Right about now, we'll take a tribute from Harriet Harman, who is with the Labour Party of the United Kingdom.
Well, I think Kofi Annan was a huge figure on the world stage, leading the United Nations for the best part of a decade. Everybody knew the name Kofi Annan and the amount of respect that he generated as a person, but for the institution of the UN was incredibly important. And I think as we reflect and pay tribute to him, we reflect on the importance of the UN now and for the future. He always came across as a very gentle, thoughtful, sort of very intelligent, but also down-to-earth person. He was right at the top of what he did, and yet he always seemed very approachable, seemed like a modest person, never grand, but very focused on the important work of the United Nations. I think he will be remembered for the respect that grew in the United Nations. You know, he took it over and the reputation of the UN really grew with him as the leadership.
Let's take another tribute by the United Nations.
Remember Kofi Annan most for his dedication to peace and human rights, to his unfailing belief that diplomacy, dialogue, and just the United Nations works, that we can avoid conflicts, that we can resolve conflicts, and that we should never give up. We need to keep pushing, we need to keep advocating for human rights, even in the face of seemingly impossible obstacles.
We have brought you several tributes across the world on this global icon. We are streaming live on our Facebook page at GH1 TV. So drop your comments there. What do you remember Kofi Annan for? I keep saying that growing up, I was always told by my mother to study really hard and become like Kofi Annan. How about you? You can let us know. We're streaming live on Facebook. So now we've brought you part 1 and 2 of the biography of the late Kofi Annan. Let's bring you part 3 of that now.
He was an extraordinary leader. Very bold, very organized, very efficient, very systematic in his approach to everything. But above all, he treated all his staff, from the most humble to the most senior, with the utmost respect. He would listen to you very carefully, ask a few probing questions, and was always courteous, always calm. He never lost his cool, never, lost his tempers, always very much in control of himself.
Former Secretary General Kofi Annan had continued working since he retired from the United Nations. We had all seen his work in many places in Africa and had counted on that continued work, so we're all very shocked. I think our hearts go out to his entire extended family at his loss. I think it's been a week of reflection for many of us, of remembering opportunities when we worked with him, remembering and honoring all of his accomplishments. I think remembering him as such a man of dignity and integrity, and being inspired always as UN officials to follow that example. We're also very heartwarmed by the outpouring of tributes that have come from across Ghana, and for the government is now preparing a state funeral for him. We'll be welcoming dignitaries from the UN from across the world, and we really appreciate this expression of respect that is being paid to our former Secretary General.
His calm disposition and excellent language skills were key factors in his appointment. Mr. Annan's first term saw him seeking to reform the global body to make it more reflective of contemporary realities. In addition, he also championed development-oriented goals, such as the Millennium Development Goals, which evolved into the Sustainable Development Goals. He also supported the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. In addition, he also championed women's rights, exemplified by the appointment of Louise Frechette of Canada as Deputy UN Secretary General. For all these and more, Kofi Annan and the United Nations shared the Nobel Peace Prize in 2001.
Months before the end of his first term, the African ambassadors came together, all of them, and marched to his office to urge him to agree to stand for a second term. He accepted their appeal, and the end result was that he was inducted into his second term months before the end of his first term. Such was the consensus that this man had done an excellent job and he needed to continue.
The one thing that he introduced onto the world scene was his leadership in the promulgation and launch of the Millennium Development Goals. Goals that were deliberately set out and were accepted by the entire world to reduce poverty and hunger and promote education and all such things.
That was based on the premise that the UN really has principally three mandates. First, the prevention of conflict, working for peace, but at the same time, the UN Charter enjoins the UN to work with member states, with multilateral and other institutions for development. It was during his time that we began to see that there's an important work to do in working for peace and stability, but also about bringing about development, and at the same time, mindful about ensuring respect for human rights, justice, democracy, and building institutions which truly the people can participate in to ensure peace, stability, and development.
Kofi Annan's second term of office, which began on 1st January 2002, was to be a real test of his principles and his strength of character, as he resolutely sought to speak truth to power on the eve of the Second Iraq War in 2003.
He believed in principle. He believed in the United Nations, and he believed strongly, as Secretary General, in the centrality of the role of the UN Security Council as the key institutions of war and peace. So the fact that the Iraq War took place without the blessing of the UN Security Council, this was a matter on which he felt he had to speak out. And of course he had the courage to speak out. But as you rightly observed, the consequences were quite dramatic, and it was tough. The next few years were pretty tough. Not only for him personally, but also as Secretary General of the UN, and for the UN as an institution. It took quite a battering because it was perceived as opposing the invasion of Iraq. So yes, it took quite a toll, but he stood firm.
Kofi Annan served out his term and returned to private life in 2007, although he continued to serve humanity even after his retirement from the world's top public service post. He helped resolve the post-electoral conflict in Kenya in early 2008 and later on mediated in crises in Syria and Myanmar.
Mr. Kofi Annan wrote a book. I think Interventions was the title. He comes to the UN, and it was a source of pride for me as a Ghanaian still working in the UN, an organization that was led by a Ghanaian, to see staff members and visitors from all nations, all races, all parts of the world line up for a long time to just go and get him to autograph this book. Some just wanted to see him again.
Mr. Annan was passionate about improving the lot of people everywhere and was particularly keen on improving the lot of poor farmers in Africa, which he saw as being essential to improving food security on the continent.
The Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa was his brainchild, because he said Africa is the only major region of the world which had not had a green revolution. He was very concerned about food and, nutrition in Africa. So he set up the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa to bring together the best minds, the best scientists, to consider how to help boost a green revolution in Africa.
He continued to support a wide range of humanitarian causes, aided by the Kofi Annan Foundation.
The world that I'm working to create is a world that should be of interest to all of us. I'm working to create a world that is stable, that is peaceful, where we as human beings realize that we cannot consume the resources of the world the way we are doing, as if there's no tomorrow.
You're still watching our special coverage of the final funeral rites of the late Kofi Annan. And earlier today, there was a 1-minute silence held in honor of the global icon in Geneva. Let's take a look at that.
Thank you for coming so many here to this very hasty gathering.
And that was a minute silence held in honor of the global icon Kofi Annan in Geneva earlier today. And from us here at GH1, we can understand why many people turned up, because this man is Africa's illustrious son. Well, we put together some favorite quotes from the late Kofi Annan. Take a look at it. We'll come back and we'll go live to the Accra International Conference Center. You're watching GH1 television. My name is Sewa Amir. Let's take you back to the Accra International Conference Center and join in the ceremony as dignitaries file past the mortal remains of the late former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. And as you can see, well, I think I can see Joshua Alabi and Esiedun Ketia, the General Secretary of the NDC, making their way into the foyer to pay their last respect to the former UN Secretary General. I can see Madame Ikia Donko as well, making her way to the foyer to pay her last respect to the global icon. And today, day 2 is reserved for dignitaries, that is members of the diplomatic corps, political parties, ministers of states, members of parliaments, chiefs, and we know that the president and vice president will not be at the Accra International Conference Center today, but tomorrow will join in for the burial service that will happen there, and then later a private burial service at the new military cemetery, which will be very, very private. So on your screens there is live pictures from the Accra International Conference Center, dignitaries paying their last respect to the former UN chief. We can see chiefs paying their last respect. We are still expecting some heads of states to join in to pay their last respect. As at now, we know that the association or delegation from the Mfansipim Old Boys Association have gone to pay their last respect. We know that a delegation from Akwemufie have also gone to pay their last respect. Very soon, my colleague Ridwan Karimdini Osman will be engaging a few dignitaries that have come to pay their last respect, but you can see on your screens members, dignitaries filing past the mortal remains of the late Kofi Annan. Unfortunately, today is not for the general public, as that was done yesterday. And we will let's just bring you a few or something little about the biography of the late Kofi Annan. Yesterday, Ghanaians from all walks of life filed past the remains of Kofi Annan, even though there were concerns over the casket being closed. I think that it still really doesn't matter in the scheme of things so far as we get to pay a last respect to the global icon. Kofi Annan, a man celebrated by many. We have seen delegation from South Africa, from Iran, from Poland, from UN. We are expecting the current UN Secretary General Antonio to come pay his last respect as well. And so you can trust GH1 Television will bring you all the updates from the Accra International Conference Center. If I can see clearly, I can see someone like the Speaker of Parliament. I'm not so sure. But, okay, unfortunately, he is not the one. Yes, but you can see dignitaries pay their last respect to the late Kofi Annan. Political parties or delegation from political parties. We saw earlier the chairman for the National Democratic Congress, Chairman Potofi, with his general secretary. With his general secretary pay their last respect. We've seen Ikia Donko, we've seen Gusi Tano, who is also an incoming, an aspiring flag bearer for the National Democratic Congress. On your screens now, Mr. Johnson Esiedun Ketia, General Secretary for the NDC. You've just saw Kofi Adams, National Organizer for the NDC, all just paying their last respect to the late Kofi Annan and greeting the family of the late Kofi Annan. And this is coming to you live from the Accra International Conference Center. We are expecting more dignitaries and members of parliament to file past the remains of the late Kofi Annan. We're still expecting heads of state to pay their last respect. My colleagues Ridwan Karimdini Osman, Wilberforce Asari and William Evans Inkum in a short while will be engaging some of these dignitaries who just filed past the remains of Kofi Annan. But you can see there live pictures from the Accra International Conference Center. The late Kofi Annan was brought in on Monday from Switzerland, where he died peacefully. The president, accompanied by the vice president, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the Speaker of Parliament, and some dignitaries, were at the Accra, the Kotoka International Airport, I beg your pardon, to receive the remains of Kofi Annan. We brought you that, and we'll continue bringing you a comprehensive coverage of the final funeral rites of Kofi Annan. Tomorrow, it will all be crowned with a burial service at the Accra International Conference Center. From there, we'll proceed to the military cemetery, where it will be a very private ceremony to say a final goodbye to the global icon Kofi Annan with a 17-gun salute. So you're still watching our special coverage of the final funeral rites of the late Kofi Annan. And we can see on our screens now the wife of the late Kofi Annan going to pay her last respect to her husband, Madame Marie Annan. That's her on your screens right now, in the company of some family members paying their last respect to the remains of Kofi Annan there. She came in on Monday, accompanied by relatives and family members, to bring in the remains of the late Kofi Annan, which was received by the president, accompanied by vice presidents and dignitaries in the country. When we talk about the man Kofi Annan, let's just bring you some of the things that he will be remembered for. How in 1997 he brought a great sense of pride to Ghanaians and Africans as a whole when he was inducted into office as UN Secretary General. He became a role model for many young people in Ghana, including myself, and on the continent, who aspired to be like him. He worked to diffuse tensions in many theaters of conflict around the world, in particular the nuclear standoff between US and Iraq. And in 1998, he traveled to Iraq to negotiate directly with Saddam Hussein to give up his nuclear weapons in order to avert an imminent attack from the US. We can also remember how he stood firmly against the decision of the US to invade Iraq in 2003 against international law. And we also remember how he devoted himself to humanitarian causes, including membership of the Elders Group, among others. And his death has brought great sadness to Ghanaians and the world as a whole. You can see on your screens there Madame Marie Annan, wife of late former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. You have seen many Ghanaians come from far and near to pay their last respect to the global icon. In a bit, we'll be crossing over to my colleague Ridwan Karim Dini Osman to bring us more updates from the Accra International Conference Center. We must also let you know that we are live on Facebook, and your thoughts and comments are welcome. You can share your fondest memories of the late Kofi Annan, and we'll read them on air for you. Tomorrow we'll be bringing you the burial service of the late Kofi Annan at the Accra International Conference Center. So far we have been bringing you the rites for the man. We started yesterday. Today is day 2 of the funeral rites. You can see Madame Marie on your screen, greeting family members. But we will be crossing over to the Accra International Conference Center still. My colleague Ridwan Karim Dini Osman is standing by to bring us more updates. Hello, Ridwan.
Hello, Sawa.
Very well, Ridwan. What more can you tell us? We see a lot more dignitaries filing past the mortal remains.
Like you rightly know, the wife of the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan, Madame Nani, just arrived here at the Accra International Conference Center, led by a delegation of family members, and she just filed past the mortal remains of her late husband. As we speak now, she's exchanging pleasantries with the chiefs and people of Akwamufie, and of course the elders from the family house of Mr. Kofi Annan in Cape Coast. And so
So that is what is happening right now. But I must say that we have seen personalities whose backgrounds cut across the entire political spectrum. We have seen, of course, the former Chief Justice, Madam Theodora Georgina Wood. We've seen the General Secretary of the National Democratic Congress, Mr. Asiedun Ketia. Of course, we have also seen Mr. Paul Afoko, who is a former chairperson for the ruling New Patriotic Party, I must say. And so in a bit, we'll be engaging some of these personalities. We've also seen the national organizer for the largest opposition National Democratic Congress, Mr. Kofi Adams. We'll be engaging all these personalities. But it's indeed beautiful how this program has more or less injected some unity into our political, energy and atmosphere. I saw the likes of Mr. Asiedun Ketia, Kofi Adams, and of course other top echelons of the New Patriotic Party, all in the same queue, filing past the mortal remains of the late UN Secretary General, former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. It's indeed a very quiet atmosphere here, I must say, but this is all an indication that gradually we are exhausting the number of people that we are expecting to actually show up today and file past the mortal remains of the late former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. And so just try and engage a lot more people right here on GH1 television. Hello, sir. All right, how are you doing?
We are doing very well.
You're live on GH1 television. Just share with us your fondest memories of the late Annan.
Well, His Excellency Kofi Annan was a great diplomat. He paid his dues well to the world, and we as Ghanaians are proud of him. So we came to bid him farewell for his services to humanity. It's a great lesson, especially to young people in public service, and we are so proud of him. We took the opportunity to come and bid him farewell.
What would you say his demise has
his humility made him a special person, and he achieved a lot through his personality. And I think that these are all lessons we must learn, that you can achieve through diplomacy by being humble and also being diligent in your work. I think he was a great asset to the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And so, Sewa, we are still here at the Accra International Conference Center. What you're seeing right now is Mr. Asabi. I think that's how we call him. Yeah, he just arrived here at the Accra International Conference Center. He's making his way to file past the mortal remains of the late Annan. I'm not sure he would want to say a few words. Hello, Mr. Samoa. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, so we'll talk to him in a bit. So as we speak right now, he's making his way to the foyer to actually file past the mortal remains of the late Annan. But of course, like I have already indicated, we have the General Secretary of the National Democratic Congress, Mr. Asiedun Ketia. We have Mr. Kofi Adams. I've also seen Mr. Paul Afoko. We've seen the former Chief Justice, Madam Georgina Theodora Wood, and other top government officials at the foyer. So as and when they make their way out of the foyer, we'll be engaging them to know exactly what is going through their minds. But this remains our comprehensive coverage of the final funeral rites of Kofi Annan. Right now, we are having a royal delegation. Like I started saying, right in the morning, we've seen delegation upon delegation from the chieftaincy institution. And as we speak, we have some chiefs and elders also making their way to the foyer, clad in their black and red apparels. And of course, the chief there with his subjects making their way into the foyer to not only pay respect to the late Annan, but also to commiserate with the family over this irreparable loss that indeed has brought the whole world together. So those are the chiefs and people that I understand are coming from Cape Coast in the Central region. They just arrived and making their way to the foyer to pay their last respects to Mr. Kofi Annan of blessed memory. And so this remains our comprehensive coverage on the 3-day funeral rites for former UN chief Mr. Kofi Annan. We expect the current UN chief, Mr. Antonio Guterres, to arrive in the country. We also expect other heads of states who will be arriving in the country as well. The president, we have information, will be here tomorrow. And of course, we look forward to all those messages from the heads of state, particularly the UN. We know, as you saw on GH1 television, the speech by Mr. Guterres, but I'm sure you will have a lot more to share when he arrives in the country of Ghana. So as we speak, the royal delegation from the Central region, right there on the red carpets, making their way to the foyer where the mortal remains of UN Secretary General Mr. Kofi Annan has actually been laid in state. But let me also indicate that as we speak, we have the delegation from Akwemufie who are still at the foyer. They have taken their seats already, and so whichever delegation that goes in there to pay their respect to Mr. Kofi Annan would have to also go the Akwemufie delegation, exchanging some pleasantry there. But that, of course, is part of the Ghanaian tradition, and so it doesn't come as surprising. It doesn't come as surprise at all. So right now, we are seeing the security men and women coming together. It's been a very long and tiring day, and so of course it's understandable. But Mr. Paul Afoko is already here. We'll be engaging him in a bit to understand how he feels, and of course his memories of the late Annan. Mr. Afoko, all right, so we'll be engaging him in a bit. I think he should join us in a few seconds. Mr. Paul Afoko is the former chairperson for the ruling New Patriotic Party, and he will be speaking to us about the late Kofi Annan, and of course all the memories he has to share about him. But don't forget that tomorrow our coverage continues unabated. I will bring you every sound, every sight as far as the final funeral rite is concerned, right through the Burma camp, the procession to the Burma camp burial ground where Mr. Kofi Annan will be laid to rest. And so right from 6 in the morning we'll begin our coverage on GH Today, which of course is your 3 hours of fantastic breakfast experience. Nanaba Namwa and of course my very good self will be there to begin the coverage for the day, and we'll be engaging all the state officials from other jurisdictions who today will be arriving in the country. I'm sure Mr. Paul Afoko is ready to talk to us now. Mr. Afoko, you're live on GH1 television.
Yes.
Just this way from me. Right. I would want to understand, how well do you know the late Annan?
The only people who can claim to know Kofi Annan very, very well would be those who grew up with him and our close family. But this is somebody who I got to meet personally on 2 occasions. The rest of it is the public persona everybody sees and knows. That's how well I know him. I knew him.
What do you make of his contribution to global peace and security?
Immense, immense. We have names like Utant, one of the former Secretary Generals, all those names. But I think the one name that stands out will be Kofi Annan for all the things he did, not only in terms of Africa, but the world. I mean, we have lost, the world has actually lost somebody, because even post-Secretary Generalship, look at the work he did. Look at the peace he brought to places. And this is something that I noticed about him when I met him, although I had already heard about it, that he was very quiet, he was soft-spoken, but he was very determined. He had a path he wanted to tread, he would follow it. On one occasion, I met him in the north of Ghana. That was in fact, that was, I think, the second, oh no, I met him more than 2 times anyway, but okay, that was about the second time I met him. And he was looking into agriculture in the north. And he took his time to tell me why he was here, he was there. This is a man who could have actually just folded his arms, rested on his laurels, and enjoyed all the accolades and everything that you can think of, but he still kept on going. Even to the last minute he was working, even to the last minute. Apparently he came from South Africa and got back and fell. He was actually not feeling well on the flight, got back and passed so quickly. So he was working also for humanity, for all of us. The lessons for you, the youth, lie in his life.
Right. And you were very spot on there. But how do we keep, I mean, he stood for a lot of things. Yes. He stood for youth empowerment, like you rightly mentioned. He also stood for quality leadership, especially on the continent. How do we ensure that as a people we are able to keep this vision alive even after his death?
Yes, I mean, I've heard people talk of, oh, let's build a monument, let's do... No, the monument to the person will not be in bricks and mortar. Although bricks and mortar will have a part to play. There's the Kofi Annan ITC Center. There's the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Center. Yes, that's bricks and mortar. We could also build a library where we will capture all his work and his works so that people can come to do research. But having said that, about
that can immortalize him enough. We've seen what has become of the library that was built for Professor Mills, for instance.
That's why I am saying that that will be there for the likes of you and those behind to do research, to learn about the man. Immortalizing somebody, as I said earlier, it's not the bricks and mortar. Bricks and mortar will one day collapse and that's it. I remember the great Ozymandias. If you've read that poem, you will know what I mean. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that the example of his life is where we can learn. That is how we can immortalize the man, the example of his life. The example of his life, what he stood for, what he did.
Thank you very much. But away from Mr. Annan, you've been off the scene for a while. Where have you been?
Oh, I have been around largely trying to reposition myself in life, move away from the hurly-burly of politics.
Are you still in touch with your party?
Well, I'm in touch with everybody. I'm in touch with everybody, except that this time around, it's more of going back to where I was before I came to frontline politics. That's all.
You feel sidelined by the current administration?
No. Why? Why would I feel sidelined? Feel?
No.
You're missing in the scheme of things.
No, but that's a matter of, it takes two to tango. Life is fulfilling. It's not always in politics. Life is fulfilling.
The party hasn't abandoned you.
Why do you say that?
We don't see, I mean, you used to be an active member.
What you are doing right now is trying to dilute this great day, this great occasion, and this solemn moment.
I know.
You are diluting it. You want to talk politics? Let's meet again. Please, I'm available.
I'll come around for us to have that conversation.
I'm available.
When we...
My condolences to all your viewers, your cherished viewers. My condolences to Ghanaians, above all to his family, his Kofi Annan's immediate family. But we have to console ourselves that this is a life well lived, and that the whole world mourns with us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul Afoko. Thank you. Always good to have you. Mr. Paul Afoko is former chairman for the ruling New Patriotic Party, and he says the only way we can keep the vision of Mr. Kofi Annan alive is by emulating the life he lived, embracing everyone regardless of ethnic, tribal or political persuasion. And for me, that is quite crucial. And so we are still here at the entrance of the Accra International Conference Center, still monitoring the dignitaries that are coming in. In a short while ago, we saw some top officials or party bigwigs of the NDC. We are still making attempts to get them and engage them just to also know how they are feeling. But generally, I must say that the atmosphere is calm. The drummers, I think they are tired, and so I'm sure they are trying to go get some snacks or some lunch, just to regain the energy and spring back to action. And so the atmosphere is quite, it's quite somber as usual. But of course, the drumming is off as we speak right now. But I must also indicate that we are expecting the delegation from Parliament. They haven't arrived yet, of course, made up of the minority and the majority members, and they, I'm told, would be here before 4 p.m. And so, Sawame here, generally, that is what I can say as far as the happening at the Accra International Conference Center is concerned with regard to the final funeral rites for the late Kofi Annan, the day 2. We know that we'll climax all of it tomorrow. Like I've already said, the procession to Burma Camp will be following keenly across all the principal streets of Accra. We'll also, of course, have our reporters stationed at the forecourt of the State House to make sure that you don't miss anything at all. The tributes from the family, the president, and of course, all the people who matter. The UN will capture all of that on your trusted news source, which is GH1 TV. And so in the meantime, I would want to hand over to you in the studio. My name is Ridwan Karim Dini Osman. We'll be back if there is anything to talk about again.
All right, thank you very much, Ridwan Karim Dini Osman. I think you should go grab some lunch too. But whilst we wait for Ridwan to put together a lot more interviews for us, let's bring you the last part of the biography of the late Kofi Annan.
The farmer knows instinctively that if you take something from the earth today, you have to put something back to be able to return to harvest tomorrow. Somehow, when we move to the city, we lose that instinct. We need to create a world that is equitable, that is stable, and a world where we bear in mind the needs of others and not only what we need immediately. We are all in the same boat. Let's say in a cruise, boat sometimes seems too small. Let's say we are all in a cruise. Some may be in the best suites in the boat, or this may be in a little dinghy hold somewhere. But if the ship begins to take water, whatever end of the boat you are, whatever your accommodation, we are all at risk.
And that was a short one from the late Kofi Annan, but that will be all from us here, Newsroom. My name is Sewa. I'm here. Thank you very much for watching, and a very big thank you to our reporters on the ground with Juan Karimdini Osman, William Evans Inkum, and Wilberforce Asari. We'll be back again at 3:25 with Joshua Nana Kwame with all the updates from the Accra International Conference Center. And tomorrow, we'll crown it all up with the funeral, the burial service at the Accra International Conference Center. Have a good afternoon and keep watching GH1 TV.
Through difficulties before. But I think the difference from where I sit, or the way I look at it, the difference between today and in the past is in the past when we went through this sort of crisis, you had leaders who had the courage and the vision to want to take action, to understand that they needed to work with others. Today, leaders are going in the wrong direction. Leaders are withdrawing. Normally you get lots of noise from other quarters. Today the noise is coming from the leaders.
GH1 TV, your best experience. State of Affairs brought to you by Cowbell Gold. Go on energy drink, no limits. And everywhere you go, MTN.
Welcome to State of Affairs, brought to you by Cowbell Gold and